everybody, welcome. I want to talk about Robert Zemeckis was recently interviewed, or in an interview, got asked about Who Framed Roger Rabbit 2, which I guess a few years ago got announced, and kind of nothing ever came of it. And his response was, well, it's written, it's a great script, it will never see the light of day. And his argument, which I feel like is a little bit of a cop-out, his argument for why it's not going to happen is basically that sort of sensibilities in the studio system have changed, and basically the original Roger Rabbit would never have gotten made in kind of the current cultural climate. And he specifically points out Jessica Rabbit, and they'd never let you do Jessica Rabbit nowadays. In the theme parks, she's all covered up in a trench coat, and you're not allowed to let Jessica Rabbit be sexy anymore. I don't totally buy that that's why this wouldn't happen. But that said, by the way, I just noticed, just sitting next to me was Who Framed Roger Rabbit on VHS, so that's cool. So always close to me in spirit, and literally. But I mostly wanted to use this as an opportunity to talk about the Roger Rabbit movie that I wanted to see as a kid, or I guess not as a kid, but growing up, I always thought, we always got the Roger Rabbit short films before movies, before Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and I can't remember what other movies they were in front of, but I know there were 3, because I have the VHS of all 3. And, whoa, I'm just getting my ass handed to me. So we always sort of got these little, spiritual, keeping the memory alive, keeping the franchise alive, these little Roger Rabbit short films. But as the years went on, the thing that I always thought about watching, because I've watched Who Framed Roger Rabbit a million times, the one thing that I always thought would have made a really smart follow-up would have been a prequel called Valiant and Valiant. I always wanted to see Eddie Valiant and his brother in their younger days, like when he talks about we used to love working Toon. Well, I'll do the Bob Hoskins American voice. We used to love working Toontown. It was a lot of laughs. But I would have loved to have seen that sort of the glory days of the Valiant and Valiant Detective Agency, and I think that would have been a smart way to, create new relationships. I've always felt like the biggest problem with trying to do some kind of direct Roger Rabbit 2 was going to be that, what made Who Framed Roger, where so much of the comedy comes from, and so much of what makes that movie special is that central antagonistic, that butting heads, frenemies relationship that Eddie and Roger Rabbit have. It's that they're forced into this situation together and they don't get along. That really fuels so much of what makes that relationship fun. But of course, when characters don't understand each other, the way to, within the movie, resolve that situation is for them to come to an understanding at the end and bond by the end, and that's what Eddie and Roger do. And I always thought if you tried to do a Who Framed Roger Rabbit 2 that was a direct follow-up, well, those characters are friends now. You're not going to have the same relationship. And I didn't like, this is sort of an adventure. This is this one time that all these characters from these different walks of life ended up needing each other and thrown into the mix together. And I just don't believe Eddie and Roger would be buddies and hanging out every day. after the events of the first movie. Roger's a movie star. Jessica's a movie star. I think, the easy route would be to say, like, well, Roger would join Eddie's detective agency, and it would be Valiant and Rabbit Detective Agency or something. And I think that would be lazy and kind of a cop-out and sort of not be true to the characters. And it would ultimately have just sort of taken all the edge off of their friendship, their relationship, because they would now be friends. And yeah, Roger would get into goofy situations, and obviously, Eddie would be sort of constantly frustrated with Roger. But at the end of the day, their relationship is completely changed by the end of the first movie. So I would love to see a Valiant and Valiant reboot down the road. It would not involve Roger Rabbit. It would not involve Jessica Rabbit or Baby Herman. I think it would be kind of cool to figure out a way of giving them their, I don't know if you can start, I guess I would maybe start creating some new short films. I think that would be a fun way to keep those characters alive. And the other thing, too, is I would say with any of these things, however you sequelize Roger Rabbit, the worst thing you could do is try to bring the characters into a different era. I know Robert Zemeckis was saying in his version of Roger Rabbit 2, Eddie Valiant was dead. And I don't know if that means, he died tragically, or, maybe that's the event, the inciting incident that sort of motivates Roger and the other characters into some sort of action. But I hate the idea of them making a Roger Rabbit sequel and it be set in a different decade. I don't want to see Roger Rabbit in the 60s, or I don't want to see Roger Rabbit in anything other than a film noir environment. And I think that's where a Valiant and Valiant spin-off or prequel, I think would lend itself really well to still have the same tone and the same vibe as the original movie. And I guess I should say, I want them in a noir environment. Well, obviously, if you're doing the short films, the short cartoons with the characters, that's a whole different kettle of fish, as they say. But yeah, where do you guys stand? First of all, where do you stand on Who Framed Roger Rabbit? For me, it's a top 10 movie. It's such an important piece of my childhood, but it's also a movie that I've gone back to many, many times over the years, and I think it still not only holds up, I think I get more out of it. There's more layers to it. There's every kind of comedy you can think of. It's broad, it's subtle, it's dry. There's so much going on all the time in that movie. There's never a moment. Every line is spoken in a way that is so quotable and memorable. But yeah, where are you on Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Where are you on, if they try to do a sequel today, what do you think that should look like? If they should have done a sequel back in the day, what would that have looked like? It is also hard for me to imagine a Who Framed Roger Rabbit without Bob Hoskins. So for me, it's one of those things where I feel like when Bob Hoskins died, any possibility of a Roger Rabbit that is moving forward was done. I think you could still do Valiant and Valiant. I think that would be a lot of fun, and you could still do it now, because even back then, you would have been recasting, because in my mind, it is a young Valiant and Valiant. So I don't think even back then I would have wanted Bob Hoskins to play it. You would have had to have found a guy that sort of captured that Bob Hoskins magic, which might be hard to do. But I still think that is a possibility. Anyway, yeah, where do you guys stand? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching. Please, if you haven't, hit that subscribe button. And I am about to face off against the Space Armada. So, wish me luck. Bye-bye.